Action.
All right, please join with me in honoring our country. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Rosen. Let's.
Heavenly Father, we come before you today and thank you for the gift of a new day, and be with each one of us here as we gather to not only learn a little bit about some things that maybe we don't know about already, but to prepare us for service to others as Rotarians. As we gather today, bless the food for those who are eating, and be with those who can't be with us. For we gather in your Son's name, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Mr. Honeycutt.
Good morning, Rotarians.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Say it ain't so.
So close.
So close.
Good morning. How are you this morning?
Well, I've been at the ER since about 4 o'clock.
ER.
Here you go. My sister.
All right.
There's her dollar. Thank you. I'll pay it here in a minute.
All right. Several items this morning.
Yeah, she fell and hit her head yesterday.
Let me get my
That's right.
I'm always getting stuff. Ready to let us watch.
You're the one that does it. That's why you do.
I saw you put it in.
You can't read, right?
No. Okay, are you ready, Michael?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good deal. All right, several items quickly. Ron Leitch,
Yeah,
perimeter. How was it this morning?
it was very good. We had one little scuffle in the southeast corner. I took care of it.
Okay, you're covered. All right, good deal. Richard Tucker.
Good morning, Wayne Honeycutt.
Good morning, how are you? All right, Jake's food. How is Jake coming along this
He's
morning?
doing fine, he's doing fine. We've got some food for him.
Okay, good. All right, 2 announcements, and I've got something else to share with you. Saturday, past my house, the horn blew all the way down. Yesterday at 3:10, a silver pickup, whoa, blowing the horn. All right, I'll be honest, this morning, I decided I'm going to retaliate.
And he did.
All right.
That's not how you act.
I drove through Richard's driveway this morning.
Man, that's close.
My goodness.
Then I caught Steiger pulling out of his driveway, and I just tooted the horn a couple
You
times.
tooted the horn a couple of times. Yeah, that's
All right.
exactly right.
Good deal. All right, now, I'm gonna have to do this, yes.
Is there a fine involved in that, or is this
Well,
considered a wash?
Sharing information.
Go.
I'm gonna let it ride this time.
You're gonna let
It
it.
sounded to me like somebody was bragging.
Yeah.
Now,
Sharing information.
all right.
Boy, like service of outfield tomorrow.
I have 2 pictures. Somebody saw this on the email that Rhino sent out with their winter warrant. Okay, we had 2 individuals hugging and kissing. That looked like it, yeah.
No.
This morning.
Say it isn't so.
All right, that's right.
Say it ain't
And
so.
then Gavin Sinclair was up on top of the table like he was gonna dive out on the group. I'm gonna pass this around. Gavin, I need $1. And also, I need $1 from you. This is extra. And Steiger, I need $1 from you. Look at the
Organizing the whole
Look
thing.
at the picture.
Yeah.
Look at this. Hey, I've got evidence, hard evidence right there.
You can't tell who that is.
Yeah, I think I can.
You cannot.
Oh, we were hugged up.
Well, I smiling or not?
All right,
There's my butt.
all right, I need
I knew it
$1.
was coming.
Was I smiling?
Michael, I need another $1. All right. Now,
Gary?
here's the news this morning. Now, Gavin, let me get yours.
Nobody wants my dollar.
Yes, he does. Yes, he does, right here. All right.
That was yesterday.
Okay, last week, we sold tickets on the thermometer. Okay, Bill Lair won the thermometer. And he talked to me outside. He said he was moving. He didn't need to bring anything else home. He donated it back to the club. So we're gonna sell tickets again. There's no quota, no limit on the tickets. It doesn't have to be $30, whatever you want to put in. It's $1 a ticket. So if anybody would like to have a chance in this, and Regina, you were not here, but this is the thermometer, inside thermometer. So you have a chance. Anyone else? Kenny? Okay. All right, so we're gonna do this again. It goes to funds. It doesn't go anywhere else, so it goes to the closed session. All right, Phil Trick will handle that this morning, and I believe that's it.
Thank you. I have to admit that Lynn Seaver and I had a miscommunication. And Lynn and I have breakfast usually once a week, and I can't believe we miscommunicated. Yesterday, he told me he was going to tie one on today. And I misunderstood what he meant by that. I thought he was going to have a good time. But look, he came in wearing a tie. But why do you have a tie?
He's preaching the sermon.
Well, I was contacted by Rotary International, and they asked me if I would be a class, try to bring some class to. So I decided to wear a tie.
You tried, right? You tried.
I didn't say it worked. 5 tickets.
You already came.
This is where I get my clerk notified.
He probably doesn't even know it.
Well, that don't mean you can't give one.
No, I don't have any dollars now, we're giving them to Wayne.
Oh, so you'd rather give it to the
Yeah.
lad instead of Jake?
Have 4,
Yep,
please.
yep, come right there with me. It's appreciated.
I'll verify.
Oh, here's another dollar.
I'll give you 2 now.
It's like getting caught on a clock.
Thanks, sir.
Who wants to read?
Can I borrow another one of my dollars?
Yes, sir.
Thank you for that.
You want to borrow one?
Yeah, but I got 7 in the pot.
You want right or left, ma'am?
I don't care.
Fine.
Right there. You can do $7 or $2.
You gave me the same look my husband.
Kenny.
Sir,
As soon as Phil gets
you want?
evened up, we'll turn
I'm not
over to
selling. You
Ron.
can buy my ticket, I got the winning ticket.
Okay,
Oh,
I
then
buy
I want the right.
Right there. He's right there's the ticket. Look.
Then I want that one.
it. Yes, sir.
It's like, you know, the woman that's on death row. And they asked her what she wanted to eat. She said, no matter, I just want. And how long she lived.
Yes.
Smart one.
She's still sitting in there.
All right, I think we are okay. We'll draw at the end.
All right, good. Looking forward to the drawing, and again, Wayne, thank you for bringing that. It's a beautiful thermometer.
My pleasure.
One of us is going to walk off with it today. Mr. Leitch,
Yes,
you have done some traveling, I understand.
I am.
Would you mind sharing with us your journey?
One of the highlights of that trip, 3 years ago, I went with a group, about half of them were out of our Sunday school, but 30 from most for Hickory. There were 2 or 3 folks that were friends and people from Hickory that went with us. Traveling to eastern Canada, we spent about 7 or 8 days in Nova Scotia and Prince Edward Island, and traveled by train to Montreal, which was kind of neat, except if you want to sleep, it wasn't very neat. And then from there, by bus to Quebec, finished our travels in Quebec. So it was a great trip. I recommend, especially Nova Scotia, to anybody. That's a great area, a lot of history, and beautiful, beautiful country. A lot like northeastern New England, very close to New England. One of the things that I came back with is a big memory, something that I was not aware of, was the great Halifax explosion, which occurred in 1917. I'd never heard about it, which is kind of amazing because that particular explosion was the largest man-made explosion in the world until the first atomic bomb went off. And it really left destruction. It looked like, you'll see, I'm gonna send my book around, toward the end you can see some pictures. It looks like Hiroshima, that area does. But to set the stage here, this is Halifax over here, Nova Scotia. Continues on, all of this is Nova Scotia with New Brunswick, another province, is located over here. Prince Edward Island is also the smallest province in Canada, is right up here. And by the way, if you ever go into a high dollar restaurant and they've got on the menu PEI mussels, and you think you don't like mussels, order some. Because I hated mussels until I had a PEI mussel. They're totally different and tender and tremendous. Anyway, and of course, Halifax is a major harbor serving that part of Canada. And as y'all well know, the World War I had begun in 1917, and it was a group of Americans and Canadians and French and Britain. A group decided that the safest way to get ships carrying supplies over to Europe was to go on a convoy with military ships protecting it. The U-boats were just knocking out single ships right and left. And so what they decided to do was they beefed up the security in Halifax, and ships would load, a lot of the ships would load munitions and other supplies down in New York and other American ports. They would sail up to Halifax and sort of gather together in the Bedford Basin, and they would leave 3 or 4 or 5 at a time with the military escorts to take supplies to France and to Great Britain. What happened here was that the Emo was a Norwegian ship that was empty, and it was sent over to pick up non-military, well, not non-military, but not munitions, but just medical supplies and other supplies going to Europe. And they were sent here to pick up that from Halifax. The Mont Blanc was a French ship, and it had been to New York, and it was loaded to the gills with munitions. TNT and a lot of other type explosives, plus one of the things that really was a big problem was it had many 110-gallon barrels of benzol, which the military was using as a fuel back in that time. It basically was gasoline, or very as explosive as gasoline. And they had so much of that stored, they even had barrels up on the deck, which is important to remember. So what takes place here is the Emu had arrived about December the 4th or so, and was expected to get out of there on the 5th. But they were slow in loading the Emu's supplies, and so they were not able to leave. There is a security gate cable system at the entrance to the Halifax harbor that was used to keep U-2s out, and a number of the harbors in the United States had similar type cable systems that they put up at night to keep U-2 boats, submarines, from coming into the harbor. Well, the Mont Blanc was late arriving, and I think they closed that gate somewhere around 7 o'clock at night. They had to stay outside the gate on December the 5th, rather than come on into the harbor and go on up to the Bedford Basin. So on the morning of December the 6th, about 7 o'clock, both of the ships started moving about the same time. The Emu moving to get out to the Atlantic Ocean, and the Mont Blanc heading up with their fully loaded munition supplies, coming up to Bedford Basin to gather up with other ships to head over to Europe. Basically what happened was, this area right here is known as the Narrows, and you can see as far as 2 ships passing, it was pretty touchy. And so they had to be very careful in this particular area. Well, as it turned out, there was kind of a jackleg guy that was the captain on the Emu. He didn't like anybody telling him what to do. They were supposed to pass port to port, which would be on the right side of each ship as they passed. So that means that this guy here was supposed to be passed over here, and the Mont Blanc was going to pass over here. Well, this guy was already ticked off because they held him up from leaving. So the maximum speed is supposed to be 5 knots. So he starts coming out of there at about twice the allowable speed, coming through, heading towards the Narrows. And at the same time, the Mont Blanc starts heading heading on up into the Narrows area. When they get about 3/4 of a mile apart, actually the Mont Blanc had been boarded by a by a captain, by one of the harbor pilots. They're about 3/4 of a mile apart. The harbor pilot on the Mont Blanc sounded his horn once, which means just let him know I'm here and I see you, and watch out what you're doing. Well, this guy here, the wise guy, he sounds off 2 blasts on the horn, which I think is similar to giving the big flying digit to the other boat. So he hit 2 blasts on his horn, and he didn't make any move. He just kept coming. Well, they got to this point, probably right about somewhere about in here, and the Emu, the bow of the Emu hit the Mont Blanc right on the starboard side and made a gash in the boat. And what that did was, it wouldn't have been a bad situation, except for the fact that Benzol cans 110-gallon barrels up on the deck. It knocked some of those over and opened up the top, and that benzol flowed down into the port, down into the hole, and the Emu put its boat, they were only going about 1 knot or so, a little over 1 knot at the time of the accident, so it wouldn't have been a big deal. But this guy puts his ship in reverse and starts backing out with his bow still inside the Mont Blanc, and when he did, scraping of the metal created some sparks, and it started a fire with that benzol down in the Mont Blanc. And what happened was the Emu continued. He backed up. And he continued on by, and the Mont Blanc right away. By the way, let me go back and say that very few people, other than the crew and the harbor pilot and the captain of the harbor, were about the only people that knew that the Mont Blanc was loaded to the gills with munitions. Nobody else was aware. None of the other ships in the harbor, they would have created a panic. Everybody would have left town and everything else if they'd have probably known what was on that ship and what the potential of what was happening was. So the crew on the Mont Blanc right away knew there was going to be a major problem, and they abandoned ship, and they headed over to Dartmouth on lifeboats. In the meantime, here's the Mont Blanc fully loaded with munitions, left floating out in the Narrows, and the current had it drift over to just north of Halifax to what's called the Richmond area, sort of a subdivision area of Richmond. And there was a pier there, and it just happened to end up right up against that pier. Well, guess what the town folks did in that Richmond area? What would you do if there was a big fire, a huge fire?
They come out and watch it.
Came down and watched it.
Bring marshmallows.
Half the town all came down to near Pier 6, and even people, 3 blocks away came to, this was 9 o'clock in the morning, came to the windows of the house, looking out, etc. And not only that, small ships, small boats and fishing boats and all that kind of stuff out in the harbor, they're all getting positioned like we're going to watch fireworks, on Lake Hickory. They can watch this ship burn. Well, 14 minutes after the ship they hit, 14 minutes after they hit, guess what happened?
Boom, boom, out went the lights.
Yeah, boy. And I'm telling you what, it was, as I said, it was the largest explosion that occurred until they set off the first atomic bomb.
How many people got killed?
Well, I'm gonna tell you that, since you asked.
He wasn't gonna tell us except you asked.
Thank you, Michael, for asking.
Thanks for asking, Michael.
What was the question?
How many people?
Somebody get in?
I'm about the same thing.
All right, let me just read to you sort of description of what took place. A cloud of white smoke rose to 11,800 feet in the air. The shock wave from the blast traveled through the earth at nearly 23 times the speed of sound. And was felt as far away as Cape Breton, which was 129 miles away, and Prince Edward Island, which was 110 miles away. An area of over 400 acres was completely destroyed by the explosion. And I'll start this book around, and the first tab is what Halifax and the Richmond area looked like before the blast, and the second piece of paper is a couple of pages later that shows you what it looks like afterwards. The harbor floor was momentarily exposed by the volume of water that was displaced. Now think about that. A tsunami was formed by the water surging in to fill the void. It rose as high as 60 feet in Halifax above water level, above the high level. The emu was carried into the Dartmouth and grounded ashore over here by the tsunami. Over 1,600 people were instantly killed, and 9,000 were injured, with more than 300 later died. So right close to 2,000 people passed away. Every building within a mile and a half, 12,000 total, were totally destroyed or badly damaged. Hundreds of people who'd been watching, as I said, from their homes were blinded by the blast wave with the windows shattering, so they just got a face full of glass. Stoves and lamps overturned by the force, particularly in the north end, which is Richmond area. In that Halifax area, it was an industrial area, as you can imagine. It had a number of factories and things. Large brick and stone factories near Pier 6, including a sugar refinery, disappeared into unrecognizable heaps of rubble, killing most of their workers. The Nova Scotia cotton mill, located a mile and a half from the blast, was destroyed by fire and the collapse of its concrete floors. The Royal Navy College of Canada building was badly damaged, and several cadets and instructors were maimed. The Richmond railway yards and station were destroyed, killing 55 railway workers and destroying and damaging over 500 railway cars. So it was just an unbelievable disaster. And I won't read any more of this.
What happened to the jackleg that was the pilot?
Well, I think
One from Valdez.
most of these folks survived, and believe it or not, all but one crew member of the Mont Blanc survived, because they headed over to Dartmouth, and I'm sure some of them received injuries, but they only had one fatality off the Mont Blanc, so that was kind of amazing. But I think initially they didn't put any blame on either one of the captains. In this case, it would have been the harbor pilot. But later, a second trial did put the blame on the jackleg head captain of the emu. So, one footnote I would add that was interesting. We visited a Fairview Cemetery in Halifax, and found out that Halifax was the closest significant city to the Titanic disaster in 1912. And they had over 2,000 boats and ships out of Halifax that went out to the sinking of the Titanic to help with recovery. and they have over 150 victims of the Titanic are buried in Halifax. Most of them in this one Fairview cemetery, about 125. About another 25 or so, there's a Jewish cemetery there, some are buried in, and a Catholic cemetery. So a total of about 150 are buried there. They've got a couple of monuments in that cemetery to the sinking of the Titanic. So we thought that was very interesting, that it had that connection with two big disasters. Questions?
I want to clear something up, make sure that, because I'm not a Navy person, starboard and port, which is right and which is left.
Port is right.
Right.
No, port's left.
I think port's left.
When you're facing forward, port is
Yeah,
left.
port, I'm sorry, you're right.
Okay.
Yeah, starboard's right.
The only reason I said that, I watched the Navy guys looking at each other when you were saying it.
Yeah.
I think that's when he called it a boat, I think.
They were supposed to pass port.
Boats and ships.
But
They were supposed to pass port to port.
has anybody ever heard of this explosion before?
I hadn't, so.
I hadn't.
I had, because
You
as
were there?
part of, you know, the British kind of aspect. Also, that's where I went to my honeymoon, was Nova Scotia.
Well, that's because it's.
Before or after the,
It was the second disaster.
Nova Scotia and Blackleys, New Scotland, so that makes sense.
Well, the huge immigration to that part of the world from the Scottish Highlands after the French settlers were expelled at the end of the French and Indian War. But when I remember that there's a very vibrant, still Gaelic-speaking culture there, and I remember getting the bus from the airport in Halifax, and the people behind me were speaking Gaelic. And I thought at first they were tourists, and I said, hold on, I recognize that, and that's from where I was born. So there's still, and a lot of music, fiddle music and bagpipes and so on as well. Cape Breton Island, every name is a Highland name, you know, MacDonald, McAllister, whatever. Yeah. Well, you'd have known that.
Anybody remember from your history lessons the significance of the Treaty of Paris? I think that was about 1867 or something like that. Anybody remember that? Well, it's probably one of the more significant treaties the U.S. has ever been involved in, because it was a treaty signed by France, Great Britain, United States, and it really created, the Treaty of Paris really created two countries in essence, because by the Treaty of Paris, the first four provinces of Canada were formed together, and that's where Canada came into existence. At the same time, the boundary was drawn agreed to between the U.S. and Canada, and so it really created the United States at that time, which was basically Eastern United States. The first settlement in that area was in 1605 by the French, and the French had to give up the Canadian area to Britain during that particular war preceding that treaty. But it's interesting to note that just like the United States, although the French showed up at 1605, the Mokpok Indian tribe, natives, had been there for thousands of years. So just like in the U.S., they didn't really discover Canada. It had already been discovered long before that, and the native population is still very prominent in Canada, and probably work together much more so than our native tribes in the U.S. They stick together and as a political unit and do a lot of things together that our group that seems to do so much is blame it on Richard.
The pictures here, we had the two markers of what the town would have looked like and then what it did look like afterwards. Gosh, I mean that's pretty devastating.
Yeah, it just wiped it out.
Yeah.
And who would have ever known, sitting in your house having breakfast?
Yeah.
Well, the principal that sent his kid on to school, and the school was blown up.
This is y'all, I've got a friend. Wasn't he sent?
I'm worried for him. I'm just worried for him. I'm just saying.
You need to share that with the sunshine hole in here. Ron, thank you.
You're welcome.
And what Ron has done, we've had this a couple times over the years of people going on vacations. If you go on one and come back, especially Wayne, who goes on one every other month, sharing these experiences, I think, is really enlightening for us. I know I learned an awful lot. I've never heard about that explosion and what that town must have gone through. My first thought was, what happened to that Eagle Cap? Somebody ought to, just string him up. But
Most of this same group of 30, I think probably at least 20 out of the 30, we're heading to Western Canada in September.
okay.
Calgary in that area, British Columbia, Calgary. So maybe we'll learn something that happened over there that might be worthy of a program.
This is my uncle.
I have a few things. I think only Regina and Kenny were not here last week. I have a sheet with your name on it and the size of the t-shirt you want if you are planning to work the stand down. So before you leave, if you're able to work, put your name on here and the size of your t-shirt you want. I am going to pass around this form. I need this form for everybody who's going to, even if you're going to show up in 5 minutes, please fill out this, take one and fill it out. And let me have it before you go. I need
What's
to
the
turn
date?
those in pretty soon. I need to get the t-shirts ordered in too.
What's the date?
The date is April 3rd. It's a Friday. Okay. Let's see. Also, speaking of the stand down, great big thank you to Cinda. Cinda sent me an email. You want to share what you're doing?
I'm a member of a fraternal organization, Thrivent, for Lutherans, and if you have products with them, every year you can apply for 2 grants to help another organization, and it can be seed money for a fundraiser, it can be that you buy supplies and you deliver, and so it encourages all the members to reach outside their congregation. So I had one left. I'd already done one earlier this year, and so I applied for $250 to spend on money, food for the lunch. And I got
Thank you.
through.
And
So,
we
give the
did
money
not,
and we give the work.
we didn't include that this year in our budget. We included the classroom connections and one other thing, the Hickory High ROTC. The other 2 things we normally do, we didn't include because other funds come in. So my veterans group would pay for the food, but Cinda's adding $250 to that. So Cinda, thank you very, very much. That helps. Rise Against Hunger is next month. You have to register online if you want to participate. And I will forward that link again to those of you who are able to participate. There are 3 shifts this time, 2-hour increments each time. So when you register, it will let you know whether or not that shift is full or not, and you can sign up for each shift. The bus shelter keeps coming up, and we're finally beginning to make some progress on that. I got a hold of somebody who works for the city, and they'll get behind it, they'll help, they'll approve, because part of where the bus stop is at Viewmont Baptist Church belongs to the city, but also part belongs to the church. So I need to talk to the church about it. But the Veterans Group, and we have enough money to the Veterans Group, and I was asking our group here to make a nominal donation so that we can put both things on the shelter. But it's beginning now to have some legs to it. Shelter box raffle update. Kenny, do you know where we are with that?
I've got a guy that's supposed to be getting me the TV from Caldwell TV. He's supposed to see Joe Caldwell. And once he gives me the TV and I can put what it is on there,
Okay,
we will
great. And I appreciate your work on that. Next week, we're meeting at Roll Tech. I know some of you really like to go to these things and others don't, and that's fine. Not a problem. But those of you who do want to go, please try to get there by 6:45 if you can. It is right behind Klingspor. I guess you would go down Tate Boulevard, take a left at that traffic light where Klingspor and the VA clinic is, And just on the right-hand side, behind Glensmore?
Yes, turn right behind Cleansport and
Okay, roll tech. And if we can get there by 6:45, I'll send out a reminder as well. The Science Center, I went over there, the new Science Center Executive Director is a good friend of mine, somebody whom I hired when I was superintendent of schools to be my public information officer. And she is now the director of the Science Center, and she offered a program for us if we want to meet there. There's a room. We could meet in the aquarium building for breakfast, and then we have a tour of the aquarium and the other thing that we look at, what's it called?
Planetarium.
Planetarium, thank you. I knew it started with an A. Planetarium. And we would have a tour of that. If any one of you has an upcoming program and you don't have a program, and you want that to be the program, let me know, and I'll contact her, and we'll set up a date for that. That's all I have at this time. Jenny?
We have two RILA candidates that have submitted their application. The two boys that went last year want to go back, so they have submitted their application. The two girls, they're both athletes. One's a soccer player, one's a softball player. And it conflicts with their sports schedules. So the girls could not do it because of conflicts with athletics. But the two guys are set to go. And I've done all my application and so forth, so we just need to, do you need those, do you mail the applications with the check?
In the past, I handed somebody a check, but I mean,
Probably
Ryan.
Ryan. Yeah,
okay.
sorry.
In the past, I think I handed a check to somebody, but I'll do whatever I need to do, just tell me.
We'll just wait till Ryan gets back, because we're good. It's not till March,
Okay.
but I kind of put my foot up their tail to get it done. They're boys.
Easy,
Nobody, really? Only one of you?
easy.
Any other announcements right now before we do the raffle? I want to take a personal moment if I can and just say thank you.
Cost $2.
And I don't mind paying $1 for that. Wayne, here's $1 for my personal moment.
Hey, I got you, Rick.
You've got it right here,
all right,
on
thank
page
you.
6 already.
I cannot begin to tell you what it means to me to be associated with this group. As a charter member, I have seen this group evolve, its ups and downs, and its stick-to-itiveness, and the quality of the people. And what makes a club is the people. And I don't care how big or how small, it's the people, and it makes a big difference. And I just want to thank you for everything, and I want to thank Lynn for trying to bring some class to this. Next time we tie one on, I'll know what you're talking about. But thanks to all of you. All right, any other announcements, anything, Steve?
And Rick, I'd like to pay $1 for my demeanor where I make people feel bad, so I don't mean to do that.
What's Michael whining about now?
I don't mean to intimidate people.
But speaking of sunshine, we're not. But Kenny, would you mind sharing?
I have a gentleman that's going through a divorce.
We're a little bit worried about his wife. Go ahead.
No, I have a gentleman that's going through a divorce, and he sent me these two texts. The first one says,
Remember, we're being recorded.
the husband is watching TV hollering, don't go in there, don't go in there, don't go into church. His wife walks in there and he's watching their wedding video.
Oh.
Next one is husband. I want you to have this bracelet. It belonged to my grandmother. Wife says, why does it say do not resuscitate?
Oh, I think you need to pay $1.
Here's my $1. Get that for
Rick made me do it.
I made him do it, so that's all right.
Rick, I'm gonna pay $1 for a sunshine note to say I wanna thank everybody for your prayers and concerns. BB is doing great. She's making a great recovery. We're walking outside when it's not raining and that kind of thing, so she's come along real good. So
Glad to hear it. Give her our love.
Yes.
Phil, you wanna, wait, Steve, you have something, or somebody else, anything? Oh, wait, you had to have.
$20, Regina collects all the change, and she'll bring it back in a bill, which is great. So she's earned in $20 this morning, so been collecting. That saves us having, Lynn and I have to go through all the.
You know, the way things have been going this year, I think our cart donation will be higher than it's been in a long time.
It'll be right on par. I pay what we budget, it's 500, then when we have over, I make a separate
Okay,
check.
all right.
So it's easier to track how much over budget we pay
That's
that we collect. So-
good. All right, Phil.
Phil,
Drum roll.
Speaking of cart,
yes, shake it up.
before we draw the tickets, I have the program on March the 4th. And so it's a perfect time for me to do another cart challenge to you all. I will match whatever you donate to cart up to $100 on March the 4th. So bring your money for the bucket. As you know, I lost a good friend to also just a horrible thing. Alrighty. I'm not in, so I'll draw.
Okay.
That's what you said the last time. I'm trying to feel.
Not that one, not that one.
Get the one that's big.
Pick a red one.
Got cocoa butter. 810, last 3 digits.
Missed it by one.
Wait a minute, see the time, the time is. What was it?
810.
Okay, I got 8, and there's 1 0 and 8. Did I not win?
810.
Oh.
810 right here.
I got an 8, 0, and a 1 also.
810.
All right, got 2 0.
There you
go.
Yeah.
1 0.
Steve!
We think, say, do.
Is it true? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? Thank you, have a good week.